So one of the challenges that we have at OWASP, right, at the moment is actually communicating the enormous amount of body of projects that we have at OWASP. So in some ways, you guys mentioned about 7 or 10 probably different. In some ways, OWASP has about almost 100 projects, scattered throughout a whole bunch of initiatives. It's actually to the point where if you can think of a project, we basically have somebody trying to do it, right? And I think that one of the things that we need to do much better is communicating exactly what we do and how to get involved into our projects. So what I want to start when this thing actually loads up here is I want to start to give you a quick tour of the projects that we have, and actually I can go online. All right. Can you see that? All right. Okay. All right, not the best, so I don't want to debug this thing now. All right, so one of the things that we have, right, at OWASP is we actually have quite a big set, right, of projects that in some ways cover the entire space of application security. We have things from managing application security with guidance, we have a bunch of tools, we have application security education materials, we do a lot of research on new technologies, we're trying to figure out a way to building and acquiring secure applications and also to verify it. So there's a whole bunch of projects that basically cover this spectrum, and we basically are involved in quite a lot of them, right? So basically one of the things we do, right, is, and this is the problem, right? So the fundamental problem is that in a lot of ways, there's actually a lot of OWASP projects. And one of the things we still don't do a very good job at is actually filtering them out and really making them in a consumable format. And one of the things we're actually trying to do is we're trying to raise the level of professionalism of OWASP projects and finding a much better way so that it's consumable for you. And in fact, one of the things that we're trying to do with the whole idea of the connections is we're trying to really figure out a way to connect the people who use the tools to actually people who can develop it, and also find much better ways to get people involved. So again, if you have a particular OWASP project that you kind of want to be more involved with, or you kind of want to know more about, we really want to facilitate a lot of that to what's it called? Integration. So I think this is a little bit out of date, this thing, but we basically have about 100 projects, a lot of tools, a lot of different things involved. We have a lot of documentation projects, right? Which is, this is kind of just a small number of projects you can see. And in fact, because this presentation is a year old, there's actually, so the clasp is still there, although the clasp has been replaced by the OpenSam project, which is actually one of the projects I really would like to call your guys' attention, because it's actually a really key project for OWASP. And what we also have is we have a bunch of activities, right, which you're basically calling, basically technologies that we cover. And in fact, this is sort of maybe almost like the baby steps of the ecosystems. I think what we kind of realize that one of the great things we can actually try to do is actually create these ecosystems the way that, for example, Jeff talks about it. And one of the things I view of the ecosystems is we actually need a case where each ecosystem has its own set of tools. Because the problem you have here is that if you talk about, for example, a black box scanner or a code review guide or even OpenSam or a lot of other tools or documents, a lot of the times you actually need to put them into context. So to have that general is actually quite hard. We have a code review guide, but it covers 4 different technologies. And that suddenly becomes really hard, because what basically you have is this case where, okay, the .NET guidance is a little bit different than the Java guidance, a little bit different than the Python guidance, etc. So I think the ecosystem is actually going to clean a lot of this, because we basically need to really be merging a lot of our projects together. And okay, so let me just quickly go through some of our 10. So the idea that this is 10 projects you guys really should know about. And I think there's a couple missing here, because I lost the presentation I had with the most updated version. So I think there's about 2 here that I'm going to add once I finish this, to make sure you guys are aware of. Right? So the first one is, of course, is the top 10, right, which has reached release quality, and we got basically, I think most of you guys have seen the new version of the top 10. There's actually talks to do the top 10 in, what's it called, for different parts. So we want to do a top 10 for web services, maybe a top 10 for architects. I actually would like to see a lot of different top 10s, each one focused on a particular part of technology. And what we have for the top 10, have you guys seen the book that's out there? Okay, so I really recommend that you guys take a look at that book, and one of the things we want to do is see if you guys want to grab a bunch of those books and distribute it to developers. We really think that that book should have a big, wide distribution, because it's kind of like, if you haven't read or looked at the issues on the top 10, you're really not really understanding application security. So in fact, for some of the guys who have commercial backing or have some funds to invest on some of marketing, there's actually a couple of companies who are basically grabbing the top 10, added their logo to the back, and distributing across. So it's a great compromise, because they get the kudos of distributing it, and we get basically another 100 or 500 of OWASP top 10 books distributed, and a lot more people educated. So the testing guide is another one of those guys that has really, has quite a lot of adoption, especially on the pen testing community. And he has a really, how many of you guys use the testing guide here or know about it, of the testing guide? So one of the things I would also recommend is that he has a pretty good methodology, and he has a pretty good focus. And what's good is the project work, so the work on a new version is starting now. So Matteo, which is the project leader, has done a great job, and he's actually starting the new version of the testing guides literally as we speak. So if you guys want to be involved in that project, now is really the perfect time, because there's a lot of active development, and they're trying to figure out how to take it to the next level. And also one of the things I want to be involved with is actually from an O2 platform point of view, to actually try to automate a lot of those tests. So how many of you guys used or know about the legal project? Okay. So if there's one project that you guys have to check out, especially if you are on the consumer side, on the people who actually buy or purchase application security, this is the project you have to look at, right? This is basically 10 pages or 15 pages, which give you a template for a software legal contract focused on security. It's probably the single little thing that you guys can do to influence application security in the software purchase. Because when we arrive with the security vulnerabilities, right, and we give it to the clients, the first question that comes on the other side is, who pays for this? Right? This document helps to clarify exactly that question before the thing even becomes. So this is not very big, because in some ways a lot of it is the issues are, you can clean them up quite quickly. But actually just going through this is a major step. So we already heard of, there's a couple of governments who are trying to implement this as part of the procurement process, and we know a bunch of companies who already do that. So whenever they purchase software, they basically put this in the contracts and say, hey, we need to address these issues. So this is a really, really key OWASP project, and in some ways pretty stable, because it already does what it says on the tin, right? It basically gives you a secure contract annex. So, and that's kind of what it is, right? So very quickly, you guys can see that there's like an introduction, there's the bits, there's the security requirement area, so you kind of go through the bits from a legal point of view that you need there. So this is the code review project, which is come out of beta now, but this is basically trying to do the same thing for code review. Again, it has restarted, so that was a great time for you guys to be involved. So if you want to do any code reviews, there's a lot of goodness on it. There's the S API, right? I misspelled that, right? But, oops. But so this is I think this is one of the most key projects for OWASP, right? And the reason I like the Enterprise Security API is because it forces us to ask the right questions. Now, there's two different ways you can consume this, right? One way to consume is to say, well, we really should have these security controls on the application that we're buying or developing or testing. So the SAPI is a great way for you to find them. Even if you're coding them, it's a great way to know what security controls should be there and what they should behave. And if you look at the encoding libraries and basically the validation libraries, they're really strong. Now, if you're looking for someone who already does this, there's already a bunch of reference implementations that actually show how this could work. So there's the SAPI jar, there's the .NET, there's the PHP, there's the JavaScript, there's the ASP Classic. All of them are implementations of it. So we kind of don't feel that they have reached production quality, but if you're stuck, they're a great way to actually figure out, to implement some of the stuff. And if you need a reference implementation of how to do some of those things, they basically are there. And SAPI is really critical because really it's focusing on the type of security controls that an application should have. Right? Because reality is that an application, in order to be secure, really needs to be doing all this stuff. So in some ways the question is where are they and are they doing it correctly? And if you just look at encoding, is a good example that just saying you do output encoding is not enough, because it depends where it lands. If it lands in the middle of a page, in an attribute, in JavaScript, on a CSS, in a header, it makes a big difference. So, in some ways, what this is trying to address is all those variations, all those kind of things that happen. Right? So this is kind of a little project that is kind of was actually quite hard, and we still try to figure out with this, which is actually come up with an application security desk reference, trying to consolidate all our terms so we actually have common terminology. I think it's actually a project far too big, and we still haven't figured out the best way to implement it. So we've probably heard of WebGoat, right? Of one of the most famous OWASP projects, and basically, which is just it's a vulnerable web application, so you can actually test, and there's a bunch of lessons, and it's a great way to actually teach people how to basically what a security application looks like. And there's a bunch of work that also has been trying to be done of how you deploy this, how to use it in a massive scale. So we know about a number of companies who now is almost mandatory training for them to go to the WebGoat exercises, which I think is a great way to actually enforce a lot of security awareness. So the encoding project, which basically, it's actually, it's a very small, again, variation of kind of what the SAPI is doing, and in some ways this actually has been replaced by SAPI, so I'll take that out. So Web Scarab, it's OWASP Proxy. It's basically a tag tool you use when you're doing, application security testing. There's actually two versions. There's an old version and kind of a new with a better GUI, but the old version has more features. It's still quite widely used, and the latest thing that happens now is we have a proxy now. So there's actually a proxy. So if you actually want to code against that, one of the things that Rogan did is actually decoupled, or basically, build a proxy also, which is basically something that you can now start to codify, then let that just make the requests. So in some ways you can start to embed web scarab into your other things. And this is, in some ways one of the things that we're trying to do as an organization, and I've hinted this if you guys were on the keynote, is this idea that we really want to get people together. So this was one of the programs that we did, was OWASP on the Move. And the idea that we can use our funds to get people together, to make things happen. And I think this is now basically going on steroids. So what's missing from this list is basically the OpenSam, which is actually a really key project for OWASP at the moment, which is the Open Software Assurance Maturity Model. If you guys haven't seen that, and if you're doing any kind of enterprise analysis or trying to implement an STL, so OpenSam is the evolution of CLASP. Right? If you guys actually even tried to do CLASP or were into CLASP, OpenSam is basically the new version or the next generation of it. And it's starting to have a really, really good adoption. In fact, I should have brought the books right here. But it's a really good, mature project for OWASP. And am I online? Can I go to OWASP.org? I think, did I miss anything in terms of major ones? Let's see. There you go. All right. So a couple more operational things of OWASP. Yeah, okay, it helps if you guys can see that. Where are we? Here we go. All right. So one of the things that's important to understand in OWASP is we have a wiki, right? So our world is basically a wiki, which basically means that once you have an account and you kind of behave okay, you can edit any part of the website, and starting a project is sometimes as easy as going in there and starting a wiki page. So we got a bunch of guidelines now if you want to start a project, and we really want you guys to be proactive into being involved with OWASP. So I just want to make sure that I cover basically all the major stuff, and yeah, I think I have. So I think the only one that I probably want to mention just is a bit more in detail is SAM, which basically, there's actually this external website that has, and basically there's a really nice book, and you can actually browse it online if I'm not wrong, yeah. So SAM is actually a really powerful way to gain almost like a visual analysis of where you are on your application security practices. What it does, it breaks down, right, security from a whole number of global areas like governance, construction, and verification, and then gives you a whole number of things you should be doing each one of those, and then gives you a bunch of actions that you should be doing in there. So the idea is you can actually start to deal with the shades of gray to say that, well, for this particular action, for this particular problem, I'm actually doing, let's say, the S1 levels on strategic metrics. And what you have here is a bunch of activities, which is the stuff that you should be doing for this particular level. So in this case, establish unified strategy roadmap, that's level 1, which has a bunch of activities. Level 2 has measure relative value, and again it has another bunch of activities that you can see there. And then level 3 will be like the align security expenditures and do this. So it's a really powerful way to visualize and to document actually your application security practices. And there's like a nice little chart that you can track, and then you can basically measure it over time. Any questions? Any OWASP projects that you guys heard that you want me to quickly cover it?
I saw OWASP